Welcome back to another episode here of Cal's Corner on X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And the executive producer of the show, as I've said many times because it's true, is the one and only Rob McConnell. And I'm thankful for his what he does. He's a wonderful, credible human being and a good longtime friend. So, what's on the agenda for today's show? Well, as usual, on this show we cover everything from politics to the paranormal, which is a wide variety of subjects, and today's no different. We're going to cover many different issues. Let's start with one of the most important, of course, globally, which is the subject of communist North Korea. Now, as I pointed out in a long article that was published recently in Daily World newspaper, which is an international global newspaper published from India in the English language, North Korea has been on a charm offensive the last few weeks, actually a little bit over a month now. And if you believe their propaganda rhetoric, you would think that they're just a communist paradise in their sweetness and light. But none of that is true. In fact, don't be fooled by communist North Korea, because the only reason they're flying straight right now and not acting up is because they have larger designs and issues on their plate, meaning the Olympics are coming to South Korea, and North Korea had to make a decision, either have the world's attention focused on their neighbors, as in South Korea, and be ignored and isolated, which the country is, or to go ahead and turn on the propaganda charm and try to get a piece of that action to further communist propaganda and North Korean objectives. And that is exactly what they're doing. And the West, being the West, which is often too pacifistic and lazy and naive for its own good, they tend to drop their guard too quickly, as history has shown, while dictatorships take advantage of that and exploit it and often cause conflicts and outright wars. World War II is a great example of that. Look at the appeasing and the appeasement that was given to Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler in exchange for, quote, peace in our time, unquote, according to the British. And look what happened. They gave away the former Czechoslovakia, and in exchange for peace, without consulting with the Czechs, who were then enslaved under Nazism. And then, of course, peace didn't happen. World War II happened. And even if peace had remained intact, the idea that you give one nation to another without its consent is morally wrong, but yet the West was falsely claiming that it had the moral high ground on that issue, and it, of course, was a lie. So speaking of communist North Korea, they've been behaving admirably by its twisted standards lately. It has backed down for now on its warmongering rhetoric so far in 2008. Some of its athletes are even going to participate now in the upcoming Winter Olympics, playing alongside their South Korean sports counterparts in what is euphemistically being called as a show of unity. Now, does this mean that North Korea is starting to change its arguably evil and vile ways? Will it stop threatening other nations, especially Japan, South Korea, and the United States with nuclear annihilation? The answer is no. What the communists are up to is simply an opportunistic global public relations game, and what's going on is it is being shrewdly designed to exploit the upcoming Olympics with South Korea as the host, and they're going to stall for time while they perfect their new intercontinental ballistic missile, which is armed with a miniature nuclear warhead, and it will be able to hit and destroy almost any target on Earth, specifically, because it's designed to do that, hit the United States anywhere within American territory, from Hawaii all the way to the tip of Maine, as well as any target in Canada. Now, there's no question that North Korea is on this phony charm offensive, but unfortunately, based on history, Western democracies too often, inexcusably, too easily, they always let their collective guard down. So while North Korean and South Korean athletes prepare to compete both together and against each other at the upcoming Olympics, the communists have already announced a massive, look how powerful we are type military parade. They're going to hold it the day before the opening ceremony of the Olympics. Now, again, I want to repeat what I just said. Despite these so-called unity peace gestures, North Korea plans, unless they cancel those plans, to hold a huge military parade to say, look how strong we are, the day before the opening of the Olympics. That's just what they're doing. So The world's media attention will be focused on North Korea, which is exactly what its dictator wants. Communism doesn't work as well if the propaganda to support it and fool people worldwide isn't part of that shtick. Now, we have to remember that North Korea's nuclear weapons and any missiles that might carry them, they did not automatically invent themselves. Instead, this rogue regime has had considerable help during the past several decades from different countries. The first nation to assist North Korea in its quest for nuclear weapons was Russia, when it was also a communist dictatorship, back when it called itself the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the USSR. Now, starting in 1956, Russia began training North Korean personnel in the nuclear sciences. In 1958, in retaliation to this development, the United States stationed nuclear missiles and artillery cannons capable of firing nuclear munitions. Now, these are so-called battlefield or tactical nukes in South Korea. In response to that act, North Korea and Russia signed a formal nuclear cooperation agreement, tightening and expanding their alliance. The pact, in fact, started the construction of its Yongbyon Nuclear Scientific Research Center, which was opened a few years later in 1962, and it still is in use by the regime today. Now, by 1967, now this is a few years later, the USA had deployed some 950 nuclear warheads in South Korea. During the decades of the 1960s and 70s, North Korea started its own indigenous uranium mining operations. Then they developed nuclear fuel separation techniques and reprocessing facilities so that they could make atomic weapons. Now, in 1984, North Korea signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or the NPT, but let's be blunt, they never had any intention of honoring it. If anything, the regime engaged in active deception tactics to hide its atomic bomb-making activities. It refused to allow UN weapons inspectors into its own facilities until 1992, which was 8 years after it had signed the. Now, by this time, the USSR had imploded. It ceased to exist. North Korea lost its so-called security blanket and quickly cut a deal with Communist China to essentially move into its orbit and become its sock puppet. The Chinese were also busy transforming themselves into the totalitarian capitalistic society that China is today, leaving behind their strict Maoist ideological demagoguery behind. Now, receiving assistance from a steadily rising China, Russia was still valuable to North Korea, but no longer in the formal capacity as a sole partner. One of the best kept secrets in the aftermath of the collapse of the former Soviet Union was the fate of its countless thousands of nuclear, chemical, and biological and weapons experts and scientists who suddenly found themselves without jobs and financial security. Now, economically, Russia was in ruins after its own communist government self-destructed. Millions of people were not being paid for months at a time. Russia's nuclear industry alone was responsible for creating and employing 1 million people. Now, commendably, Russian and other European officials, they joined in unison with American counterparts to solve this globally dangerous, critical problem. The USA, Europe, and Russia understandably feared that nuclear weapons could end up in the hands of terrorists or criminal elements such as the mafia. They were right to be seriously worried over this issue because in the former USSR, geographically scattered across the various countries that once comprised the Soviet Union, some 39,000 nuclear weapons of various, nightmarish destructive capabilities existed. In the country of Ukraine alone, over 5,000 nukes were deployed. Ukraine at one time had the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world, controlled by a Russian government that had now collapsed. So to solve this deadly and vexing problem, the U.S. launched a secret program known as the IPP, which stands for the Initiatives for Proliferation Prevention. And what America did, spending millions of dollars, the exact figure is unknown, still classified actually, the U.S. paid thousands of scientists from Armenia, Iraq, Kazakhstan, Libya, Russia, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, etc., to work in non-weapons related capacities or to not do any work at all, especially for rogue nations. In other words, some of these scientists, they were just paid money, period, not to work for the bad guys. If they wanted to work for the West, that's great. If they didn't, they just wanted to spend their time on a yacht somewhere, that was fine too. As long as they weren't doing the bad guys' work, the so-called free world or America was happy. Now, Pakistan, for example, tried to recruit many of these former scientists for its secret nuclear weapons program. In all, the IPP removed from the market, believe it or not, at least 17,000 scientists and engineers from the mercenary market, but they didn't get all of them. And this was a dynamic that North Korea was quick to exploit. So with the help of rogue Russian scientists and the now communist Chinese, the pace of its nuclear weapons development and the construction of its vital related facilities rapidly increased. By 1991, the USA removed all of its nuclear weapons from South Korea. The Soviet Union imploded and ceased to exist in 1991. That timing is not coincidental. But yet, despite this occurrence, North Korea continued to expedite its development of rogue nukes, and in 1993, UN weapons inspectors, despite repeated attempts to independently verify North Korea's false claims that they were not building nukes, declared in their formal report before the UN Security Council that they could not certify that what North Korea was saying was true. We'll be back after this commercial break and wrap up the issue of North Korea.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Gwilda Wiyaka's latest book, The Science of Magic, Book of Mysteries, Volume 1, is the first book in a series based on her writings that open every episode of the Science of Magic radio show. Drawing on the subject matter of each guest, and armed with over 40 years' experience in shamanism, 35 years in alternative health, and degrees in psychology and religious studies, Gwilda introduces relevant and leading-edge information that supports spiritual evolution and personal empowerment. Rich with wisdom and inspirational quotes packaged in digestible segments, this is a book that will pull you from cover to cover. It will also serve as a daily inspirational reading for years to come. The Science of Magic Book of Mysteries, Volume 1 is available at our website, tsompublications.com, amazon.com, and wherever fine books are sold. Back in Victorian England, a famous theologian posed a perplexing riddle. Why are the two top personalities in the Bible tagged with the numbers 7 and 11? Academics agree the answer is found in the stunning discovery of a hitherto secret Bible structure explained in a new book called The Genesis Grid. The discovery is so simple that preschool children could illustrate it. Certain claims are hugely controversial and may offend some, but at the X-Zone, we've studied this awesome new book and agree with one expert, and I quote, "These discoveries appear to be beyond coincidence." So who or what hid this wonderful pattern in the Bible, and what might they do next? Find out more, X-Zone Nation, and read reviews on www.genesisgrid.co.uk. That's www.genesisgrid.co.uk.
Welcome back to segment 2 here on Cal's Corner Radio. My name is Kal Korff, and I am your host, and the executive producer of the show, once again, is Rob McConnell. Now, we were talking about communist North Korea. Again, by 1991, the USA removed all of its nuclear weapons from South Korea. Yet, despite this occurrence, North Korea continued to expedite its development, that is, fast track it where it could, of rogue nukes. Now, remember, when you sign the NPT, the Non-Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, you're not supposed to make nuclear weapons. You're supposed to instead use atomic power just for peaceful purposes. So in 1993, 2 years later, UN weapons inspectors, despite repeated attempts to independently verify North Korea's false claims that it was not building nukes, declared in its formal report before the UN Security Council, which hypocritically included China and Russia as its permanent members, that they could not certify that this was true. Now, China and Russia knew better, of course. They've had personnel helping North Korea on this illegally. So in 1994, North Korea agreed finally to stop its atomic weapons program in exchange for 2 light water reactors and fuel oil. Economic aid was also promised. Japan was one of the key suppliers, as were shipments of food. Now, at this point, let's be blunt, all sides involved in this negotiated agreement were slow to keep their promises. In other words, everybody was guilty. There wasn't a single villain in this case. All of them were bad. And by 1998, North Korea had not received its promised reactors, despite taking the important step to have its uranium fuel rods sealed under UN supervision. So in 1998, North Korea launched what it claimed was a satellite using an ICBM. Like Iran's rogue nuclear weapons program, this event was really a cover story for developing long-range delivery missiles. So in retaliation, Japan withdrew from its economic agreement to help North Korea, and by 2002, this is after months after the attacks of September 11th, 2001 by Al-Qaeda against the United States, American President George W. Bush formally declared during his State of the Union address before the world that North Korea was part of an axis of evil and must be stopped. So on October 9th, 2006, after several false starts, the resumption of on and off again diplomatic talks, still more stalling tactics and outright deceptions, North Korea finally explodes its first atomic bomb. So despite the tough sanctions imposed against it during the previous 12 years, none of them prevented North Korea from further refining and improving its conventional nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons of mass destruction. Instead, North Korea now stands at the precipice of perfecting not only a newly minted long-range ICBM capable of hitting most locations on Earth, but also a miniaturized nuclear warhead it can arm this delivery system with. And a lot of people need to think about this and understand the connection here. It's one thing to develop a nuclear weapon, but if you can't deliver it to a target, the nuclear weapon is useless. So North Korea has used a space program to develop powerful missiles that can go into space, and if they can keep them up in space long enough, the Earth can rotate as it does nonstop, and it can bring the desired target down within range. The missile falls back to Earth, and boom, the city is gone. Iran has used this same trick as well. They designed years ago a so-called space program where they even claim they sent a monkey up in space, and that was a cover for their rogue nuclear weapons program. Now, Donald Trump has repeatedly said the same thing that past American presidents have also declared, that North Korea must not be allowed to develop a nuclear-capable weapon that can hit the United States. Yet despite Trump's declaration that it won't happen, quote unquote, North Korea sometime later this year, according to CIA analysts and experts on this issue, barring unforeseen events, will indeed reach this deadly and infamous milestone. Now, once this happens, since the year is still young, stopping North Korea will not only be necessary for the safety and security of the free world, literally, but the cost of doing so, especially if war breaks out, will now be far greater than if Trump's predecessors, Obama and Bush, had acted properly and responsibly earlier. In other words, we must remember that under the watchful eyes of George Bush, North Korea detonated a nuclear weapon. Under Obama, North Korea steadily improved, refined, and became more powerful. Yet, despite all of these sanctions, the sanctions didn't work. Just like the sanctions didn't stop Iran from reaching the nuclear breakout point, Iran can make a nuclear bomb anytime they want to now. So, despite all the bluster by Obama of tough and unprecedented sanctions, those are empty words that mean nothing because sanctions that don't work are useless. You might as well not even bother. Now, North Korea knows this, and so does its puppet master, China. These countries, their collective hope and strategy is to make the consequences of war, to stop them, so deadly and costly in the form of human lives and material lost that the United States won't dare act. Internationally, the global community's resolve to stop North Korea remains inexcusably and pathetically weak. Ask yourself this question, folks. How many times have you seen European leaders dominate the airwaves saying we must stop North Korea? They don't, because their response has been pathetically weak. Most of the world doesn't seem to care about this issue. It's like, doesn't affect us. Well, it does. Anytime you have a country, regardless of who it is, that develops rogue weapons of mass destruction that can hit any target on the entire planet, that is a threat automatically by that dynamic against everybody. But where's the world outrage over this? Largely, it's not there. The outrage is pathetically weak, even by the United States, because while all the rhetoric is tough, the fact is North Korea continues its progress. So it would be a mistake, on the other hand, to dismiss the United States rhetoric and resolve as if America's not ultimately going to do something. Trump has made it clear, and I believe he's telling the truth, that if the United States must act unilaterally to stop North Korea, it will. And if there's going to be a war after the Olympics are over, and North Korea does debut its, globally reaching ICBM, the issue becomes, do you go to war and stop them now? Or do you let them become yet another so-called nuclear superpower who can terrorize the world anytime they want to? They'll continue to get stronger and they'll never look back, to the point where they could even conquer South Korea and nobody could stop them because of the deadly power of their arsenal. That's a question. It's a crossroads that is rapidly approaching, and the world community, the United States especially, has to make a decision on how to handle that. So what North Korea is doing, to sum all this up, is they're basically killing the clock. Okay? Their grand plan, as well as Communist China's, is to stall for whatever time is necessary to finish developing their new long-range ICBM armed with a miniaturized nuclear warhead. China wants North Korea to reach this deadly, infamous milestone because, just like the country of Pakistan, North Korea can be used as a proxy to further China's belligerent interests and global hegemony. China remains determined, let's not mince words here, to conquer the country of Taiwan. Its 2020 plan, that's the name of it, folks. It's been leaked to the public from its own military. Its dictator, Xi Jinping, last year reaffirmed his commitment to it. The 2020 plan calls for the invasion of Taiwan at a minimum of 16 different locations on that island country, using some 500,000 military personnel. China currently has 1,000 missiles aimed at Taiwan and plans a massive amphibious and submarine assault. Both North Korea and Pakistan stand ready to do China's bidding. North Korea can easily force Japan, South Korea, the USA, Vietnam to deploy valuable military resources just to keep it in check, while Pakistan can draw India's attention away from beefing up its military assets along its shared border with China. Now, China has been steadily arming Pakistan for years. It's also building 5 new nuclear reactors for Pakistan so that it can make more nuclear weapons, and it's paying billions of dollars to build roadways and superhighways that snake all the way from the coast of Pakistan they go all the way to Beijing, China. While China has recently sanctioned North Korea by cutting off purchases of its coal, depriving the communist country of badly needed hard currency and material goods and halting oil supplies to it. The blunt truth about this matter is that these are token gestures. They're not game changers. These sanctions imposed by China are not going to stop North Korea. And then, of course, you have Russia. Not only has Russia supported the sanctions out of the other side of Russia's mouth, so to speak, CIA satellites have recently caught that its oil tankers are selling illegal oil to North Korea. Now, this is, again, ironic and hypocritical and typical in the history of the UN Security Council. The same thing happened in the war against Saddam Hussein in Iraq. You had the UN Security Council continue to impose sanctions against Iraq and Saddam Hussein, yet at the same time, China and Russia and France were taking most of the bribes from Saddam to go ahead and keep the illegal oil flowing. So when the foxes guard the hen house, it's not surprising that the hens are disappearing. So unfortunately, the only way to stop North Korea and China from achieving their deadly goals, unless they stop their hostile antics, is to go to war. Now, while war must always be the last resort, history has proven that sometimes war is necessary. And we must remember the old famous adage that what is necessary is always wise. So that's my take on communist North Korea, what's going on there. After the station break here, we will turn to other subjects, such as the recent Hollywood movie Love and Fest, known as the Grammys, and the hypocrisy that the industry or entertainment industry has regarding this subject, especially of empowering women's rights, protecting women from sexual harassment, and of course, abusing and abusement by men. We'll be back after this break.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, They conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to the third segment here on Cal's Corner radio show. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and welcome back to segment 3 here. So enough about North Korea. I think what I've said is pretty clear. You either agree with it or you don't. But regardless of whether you agree with it or not, there's no denying the fact that North Korea, unless it chooses to change its ways, isn't going to. And the only way to stop North Korea and China's ambitions for global hegemony is at this point to go to war. And while I'm against war, and it must always be a last resort, as history has proven, what is necessary is always wise, and sometimes war is necessary. Just look at World War II. I think no sane person would argue that it wasn't wise to go to war against Hitler to stop him. In fact, a lot of historians say it should have happened earlier because the damage and fallout and the number of people killed in the millions would have been far fewer if the so-called civilized West had acted sooner rather than, kowtowing to Hitler. All right, let's switch subjects now to Hollywood and the music industry. And let's talk about this recent broadcast of the Grammys and what happened with that and why this is just a wonderful exercise in hypocrisy. Let's start by this. There's a expression in Hollywood that Hollywood eats its own babies, and that's kind of a morbid thing to say. The idea is gross, of course, but I understand the analogy. I've worked in Hollywood off and on over the years, and I've been to some of these parties where you have these self-important types who are the host of whatever show. You've got the directors and producers who do live in their own world, and I find that whole environment to be toxic and nauseous. And I quit going to some of those parties because I just would rather throw up, to be honest with you. So let's talk about what they did. You may remember that this whole thing about sexual harassment by men to women, sometimes men to men, sometimes women to women, began in earnest when revelations came out against comedian Bill Cosby. And what's interesting is that a large magazine in New York, very prestigious publication, had run an investigation where they identified over 50 women who have accused Bill Cosby of trying to drug them and, acting inappropriate, taking advantage of them sexually. And if you look at the fallout from that story and Bill Cosby, the media didn't really touch it that much compared to what happened when Harvey Weinstein was then identified as a chronic sex offender from the standpoint of harassing women, being even accused of rape. Weinstein is under investigation by the police for charges of rape. According to the police, those charges are pending. They're finishing their investigation. But you look at the outrage that exploded across the industry against Weinstein to the point where he had to leave his own company, and he has become persona non grata. It was many times more than the outrage against Bill Cosby. And there's kind of two ways to look at that. Either people didn't want to touch the Cosby issue because they thought, well, it was a one-off, or maybe that was the worst of all the known Hollywood offenders. Let's be honest, a lot of people know about these incidents before they ever become public, and there's a lot of this that will never, ever become public involving other people. And then, or maybe they didn't go there with the Cosby issue because he's black. Let's remember, and I've experienced this firsthand, people who dared to criticize Barack Obama, his supporters would often play the race card and say, well, you're being racist. I remember very clearly a good friend of mine named Bill Marriott. He was pro-Obama. He voted for Obama. And I spent all night up at Prague Castle with him waiting for Obama to show up and give a speech there, which we saw. And I talked to many Obama supporters because they'd come from all over parts of Germany, from Europe, especially neighboring Germany. And they told me that many of them told me they voted for Obama because they wanted to be the part of history to elect the world's first black president of the United States. And I told them that's racism. Whenever you elect anybody based on the skin color they have, which is determined by genetics and nothing else, that's racism. Now, they actually admitted that when they were honest, but that didn't stop them from voting for Obama regardless. So I told them I didn't vote for Obama for one reason. I didn't vote for McCain either that year because I didn't believe for 1 minute that he could unify the country. History has proven that that is correct. I didn't believe for 1 minute that this hope and change was real. In fact, being a longtime public speaker myself, I saw in Barack Obama all of the classic oratory tricks that a good speaker uses. And compared to other genuine, fantastic speakers, I don't really rate Obama as one of the best. I think Martin Luther King, for example, was a much better speaker, even President John Kennedy, than Obama was. And of course, I got tired of people saying, oh, well, you didn't vote for Obama because maybe you don't like black people. Nonsense. I don't care what color the skin of a person is. I'm smart enough and educated enough to know that the color of one's skin has nothing to do with the person's intelligence and that it is determined by genetics. Science has proven that many years ago. And of course, most of my friends are of color or they're not white because I know people around the world. I've been in 27 countries. I've lived outside the United States for 17 years. So I've been around the globe, unlike most Americans, and certainly people who would be ignorant enough to make that claim. So I have to kind of laugh at them and shake my head because they're ridiculous. So here we have, if we fast forward to the present, months later, after the Weinstein allegations exploded, you've got all kinds of other people being accused of sexual harassment. This includes Steven Seagal. This includes James Franco. There's many people on this list. I have no idea whether these stories are true or not. I've not bothered to investigate them. But what I will tell you is this. The idea that Hollywood, of all entities, and the music industry of all entities, they're kind of like twins joined at the hip, is the moral beacon of light and morality on this issue is insane. Let me give you an example. There was an article that was published about 2 weeks ago pointing out that the dominant genre of music now in the US is rap music. Okay? Pop music is no longer number one. Heavy metal isn't blah, blah, blah. It is rap music. Now, anyone with an IQ of over 5 who listens to the words and reads the words of rap songs, they share many messages in common. Women are called hoes. There's a bunch of foul words used to describe women. There's swearing in there. Some of the worst swear words with bad intentions behind them you can imagine, and I will not lower my standards and repeat them on this show. Women are treated as objects. They're objectified, okay? Men, they rule everything. They've got their guns, their Glocks, their money, their bling jewelry, their gold necklaces, their fancy cars, their beats, their music. All of this is negative stuff. The gangsta mentality is driven home in these songs. Well, the day that the civilized world begins glorifying gangs is when the civilized world has lost its morality. In fact, it kind of reminds me of an irony here. One of the hottest shows in the world right now is a show called Vikings. I've seen it. I do watch it. I admit that. I find it to be good entertainment. But when you look at what the Vikings were, they were ruthless, invading killers. Now, I realize it's a little more nuanced than that because they weren't the only ones invading lands and killing people. That's been a human historic problem since day one. But to glorify Vikings as something great, I don't even know where to begin to describe the hypocrisy of that. So when I see people like Meryl Streep, who praises Harvey Weinstein, saying he's God, quote unquote, or she goes ahead and defends a childhood rapist who is still wanted by the law. He's a fugitive, famed director Roman Polanski. When she's sitting there talking about Donald Trump and what he said 12 years ago about grabbing women's private parts, but yet she's idolizing, praising, and giving speeches that give tribute to people like Roman Polanski, who is, again, someone who's wanted by the police for raping a 13-year-old girl. If the hypocrisy there is so profound, it is laughable. And then when you look at the recent Grammy broadcast, you had Hillary Clinton on there mocking Donald Trump. She's very good at that. And she was reading excerpts from a book called Fire and Fury, which has been discredited, by the way, but I'm not surprised that Hillary Clinton goes to bogus sources. She often lies and makes up stuff, as my own book about her has exposed. The book is called What Didn't Happen. You can get it on iTunes. And if anybody can disprove the research in that, I'll be happy to give your money back. I've always had that guarantee. So I must single out one media personality, comedian Trevor Noah, because he was brave enough to call out Hillary Clinton for her hypocrisy and her mishandling of a sexual harasser who worked on her 2008 presidential campaign. Now, what I'm going to do very quickly is read to you what Noah said. Very short. Noah said, "I know this incident happened 10 years ago. Maybe 10 years ago the world was a different place. But I don't know. I thought in 2018, with everything we're learning about now, maybe Hillary might come out and say, hey, guys, I realize now this was part of the problem in the way I handled this. When I look back, I realized I should have done better." But it feels like Hillary's not only trying to dodge the blame, she wants to present herself as having always been on women's side, which doesn't fly. Because not only did the woman get reassigned by this guy, Hillary had moved this woman after she came out with the allegations she was being sexually harassed. Bern Strider was his name. He went on to get another job in Democratic politics where he got fired for doing the same thing to other women. So you could argue that if Hillary had fired him, she would have been protecting many women instead of just herself. Again, Hillary Clinton, you must remember that after the affair her philandering husband had with intern Monica Lewinsky, who was sexually serving him in the White House Oval Office on taxpayer time, she tried to paint Monica Lewinsky as a crazed stalker who was obsessed with her husband. In other words, it wasn't her husband's fault. He was sweet and innocent, a victim of circumstances. And of course, the Clintons have a history of saying it's not our fault. It's always the byproduct of a vast right-wing conspiracy. Well, Hillary Clinton has always been a liar for many years since she's held public office. So has her husband. That's the Clinton way, just deny and defend. We'll be back after this commercial break to wrap up the show.
Named one of the world's greatest psychics, Elizabeth Joyce is now giving readings worldwide via Skype. Elizabeth Joyce is recognized for her clairvoyant ability to help find missing persons, her analysis of dreams, past life regression work, mediumship, and her accurate predictions. Elizabeth has been a frequent guest on the X Zone radio show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, now for several years. For an appointment with Elizabeth Joyce, call 201-934-8986 or Skype at elizabeth.joyce. And for more information, you can always visit Elizabeth Joyce online at www.new-visions.com. The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howe will expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes, finds a locket, or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
Welcome to the fourth and final segment here on Cal's Corner Radio. Once again, my name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is, again, Rob McConnell. Now, let's finish up with Hillary Clinton here and the hypocrisy that she exhibits. It just oozes out of her where concerns defending women, protecting them against sexual abuse, sexual harassment, and even more nauseating, the idea that Hillary has always been supportive of women and behind these issues. It's not true, folks. So let me recap by what Hillary said on Twitter. She said, "A story appeared today about something that happened in 2008. I was dismayed when it occurred, but was heartened. The young woman came forward, was heard, and had her concerns taken seriously and addressed." This is Hillary's version of what her husband used to do when he said, "I feel your pain." He didn't feel any pain. He was just lying and pandering to voters. So then Hillary says in her second tweet, "I called her today to tell her how proud I am of her, to make sure she knows what all women should. We deserve to be heard." Now, the Twitterati, these are people who respond to Twitter postings, just crucified Hillary Clinton, and God bless them for doing it. So, Tiana Lowe said, for example, Weinstein's victims were also heard by legions of private investigators and lawyers. Nasser's victims were also heard by incompetent, evil bureaucrats. Being heard is not enough. You heard and you moved her. So, credit to Tiana Lowe. She isn't falling for Hillary's nonsense. Then there's another Twitter member. This individual named Comfortably Smug wrote, "This is the best the focus group came up with." Good point. Then Chuck Ross said, "Women deserve to be heard unless they have an NDA or something." And then Zorine said, "With due respect," this is in reply to Hillary, "it does not appear you heard her when allegations were brought to you in 2008. Why did you not fire Bernd Strider at that time? Why was she, the victim, the one reassigned?" Hillary didn't answer these tweets. She's not going to do that. She's smart enough to know that she has no defense. Then Ryan Gorman says, "Let's try this again. A story appeared today about something that happened in 2008. I was dismayed when it occurred and should have taken the advice of my campaign manager and fired the advisor. I apologize to the young woman for not doing the right thing at the time." Obviously, Ryan Gorman is trying to tell Hillary, who understands his point but won't respond to it, of course, that this is how you should have responded, not the way you did. David Schuster wrote, "Glad you and Hillary Clinton were dismayed. Your 2008 campaign manager was more dismayed and wanted the guy fired. Why did you protect him and keep him around? By contrast, the victim was moved." Again, Hillary has no defense for this. If she ever speaks about it, she'll probably resort to her "I already apologized" card, which of course is empty since she's not sincere when she apologizes, like when she kept apologizing for her email scandal. She wasn't sorry over that. Emily Miller said, "Then why did you hurt her career by making her change jobs while you put the man who sexually harassed her stay at his job? Do you ever worry he would do it to other women in your campaign?" Emily Miller then said, "P.S. Why do you continue to use a known sexual harasser who targets vulnerable women as your personal spiritual advisor for 5 more years? Did you know he was continuing to sexually harass other women lower than him at work?" And then Stephen Miller says, "Hillary really should have leaned more into her Lucille Bluth act, like her, quote, totally not drunk at right now and totally not covering for the harasser video during the campaign." Last comments against Hillary. "I was dismayed when it occurred and my super PAC fired him for the same behavior in 2016, but I went to his birthday party 3 months ago. Again, Jimmy Princeton is pointing out the hypocrisy of Hillary Clinton. She's so dismayed over what he did and what he was later fired for 8 years later, again, sexually harassing women, but she still goes to his birthday party. Go figure. So, S.E. Cupp says, when you and at Gloria Steinem were slut-shaming and smearing Bill's accusers, was that in service of making sure women deserve to be heard? Come clean. Did you call Monica, Juanita? Until you do, you will be forever part of the problem and not the solution. My hat's off, so to speak, to S.E. Cupp for saying this, and all of these Twitter users who see through Hillary Clinton's nonsense and BS. They are correct to hold her accountable for what she is saying and the hypocrisy that is typical of the Clintons. So enough about Hillary Clinton and her hypocrisy, the hypocrisy of Hollywood and the music industry over saying they're concerned about sexual harassment, yet they continue to behave and misbehave in ways that actually endorse that type of behavior. And that's everything from awarding the top music industry prizes to songs that objectify women, talk about date raping them and glorifying such criminal behavior. I'm sorry, this is hypocrisy at its worst as far as professing to have morals here, and the music industry and Hollywood just reek of it. They are hypocrites, and I'm glad that the TV ratings for the Grammys was down 20 points. I wish it had been down 50. In fact, I wish they'd cancel the Grammys entirely as long as this is how these people misbehave. Now let's switch to another subject, the last one here for this show. This is about the fact that apparently a memo is going to come out unless President Trump changes his mind in the next few days that details abuse, keyword abuse here, about the FISA program, okay? Now, the short version of this is as follows. The former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, you may remember that years ago he said unequivocally that the NSA does not spy on Americans and that they don't just vacuum up all the data. We now know that that wasn't true, that Clapper lied under oath. He said that there was no surveillance of Trump and that if there were, he would be aware of it, even from other agencies, because he's the Director of National Intelligence, which oversees everybody from the CIA to the NSA and a bunch of other agencies as well. It was created by President Bush after the fallout of the 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001 by Al-Qaeda. So he said that this just doesn't happen and there's no surveillance going on. And as I exposed as a journalist last year in Daily World newspaper, Clapper was lying. This was not true. I knew that from the beginning because I know how these agencies work. I've studied the NSA for many years, and ever since the Church Committee established in the 1970s that the NSA and CIA have spied on Americans, which is illegal, they did it anyway. Nobody holds them accountable. They even lie to Congress under oath, and nobody goes to jail over that because that's just the way it is, and that doesn't mean it's right. So what we now know is that apparently there was abuse of a FISA warrant. A FISA warrant is issued by a secret court when an intelligence agency comes with intelligence and says, look, I need your permission, a warrant, so I can continue spying and expand my eavesdropping on this individual because I've got this evidence here indicating that there's criminal activity or threat to national security. And the evidence that the judge reviews is supposed to be factual, not political. But we now know that despite Clapper's denials to the contrary, that there was no spying on Trump and Manafort. He later admitted that, well, maybe Trump was caught up in the net because we were spying on Manafort. It's a bunch of hooey and nonsense because when he said there was no spying going on, he knew there was. And then he later admitted he lied and that this was the best excuse he could give based on the secrecy of the program. Again, more lies. It is amazing to me, but yet predictable, that any of the major talk shows have Clapper on as a so-called credible guest when he has impeached his own credibility. Okay? So he tried to say, we all make mistakes, quote unquote. It's not a mistake to go ahead and deliberately mislead a judge. It is not an accident. You don't lie to judges accidentally. You do it intentionally, okay? And after Clapper was exposed for his lying statement, he said it was the least untruthful, quote unquote, possible answer that he could have given the secrecy of the program at the time. In other words, he says, I gave you basically the smallest lie I could, considering the, secrecy of the program. Well, whether it was a small lie or a big lie, it was still a lie, and it was under oath. And I don't blame the Republicans for saying, let's prosecute this guy. Now, I predict it'll never happen because look at their history. They don't go after each other the way they should because a lot of them just are guilty across the board. But the fact is he perjured himself, okay? And this is undeniable. So if the claims about the FISA abuses are true, as I've said on my Facebook page, which anybody can see, it's facebook.com/Kal, K-A-L, .Korff, K-O-R-F-F. It's a page open for everybody. I support releasing this memo documenting FISA abuses because of one simple principle, which I don't think you can argue with if you have half a brain, and that is abuses. Whenever there are abuses, the American people have a right to know about those abuses. The world has a right to know. And the reason that you out those abuses is so that once you understand what happened, you can then begin to immediately work and take steps to make sure that abuses don't happen again. Look up the word abuse. It's not anything positive. Whenever there are abuses or excesses and there's illegal acts, you need to make them public. You need to go public about them so that you can fix the problem so that they don't continue, so that you can put safeguards and checks and balances in place so that they don't happen again, so that we continue down the path of being a rule of law country instead of a country ruled by the elite. My name is Kal Korff. Thanks for joining me here on this show. We'll be back next week for another episode of Cal's Corner here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Have a great time.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.